Who is fighting for a final roster spot for the Philadelphia Eagles 2026 roster in the preseason finale tonight against Cincinnati? We'll talk about it on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. On this Friday edition of the show, we are going to preview the Eagles 2026 preseason finale tonight against the Cincinnati Bengals. We will be live for a post-game show following the game, but we got to preview this thing because although Mekhi Lemon is likely going to play at least a few drives tonight, outside of him, most of the starters, if any, they're not going to play tonight. But this is still a really important game for the second half of this 53-man roster. There are a lot of players that their spot on this team, it's still very much up in the air. Like Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, Vic Fangio, Sean Mannion. I don't believe they know set in stone who the 53 players are that are going to make this team. I think they know probably 3/4 of it, but there are guys on the bubble that if they have a really good game tonight against Cincinnati, will it be the deciding factor? It could be. Is it the end-all, be-all? Is if somebody dominates tonight, but they haven't had a great last couple months of, OTAs and training camp, will that be enough to get them on the team? Maybe not, but if it's a close call between a couple prospects that are battling at a certain position for depth spots, or maybe they're deciding if they want to keep an extra offensive lineman or an extra edge rusher, an extra defensive back. If one of those positional players tonight has a great game, again, that could push the Eagles in one direction or another. So I always find the final preseason game as a very valuable part of the evaluation process for the Eagles. And for fans, it might not matter as much. It might be boring. You might watch a quarter or a half of this game, especially on a Friday night. But I think, and that's how I used to think of it as well. But I think the year I started to appreciate the end of the preseason even more was probably 2018 and 2019. Really that entire stretch of, I would say, 2016 to 2020, the Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz era, but especially 2018 and 2019, because those 2 years especially, you learned how important depth is on your roster. Those teams had a historic amount of injuries on both sides of the ball. Like, I'll never forget watching those games, and ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, they would put up the injury graphic, and for the Eagles, it would look like an entire starting lineup on both sides of the ball. Like, it was catastrophic. They had to rely on second stringers, third stringers, practice squad players a lot during those runs to pull a rabbit out of a hat and make the playoffs. So before that, I always knew this was an important part of the evaluation process, but for the grand scheme of things, if you're going to win a Super Bowl this year, obviously you need your starters. So I don't know. I put some stock into it, but not a lot. Then those seasons happened, and now I pay a lot of attention to these games. And again, I think there's a lot of players that are fighting for their jobs, not just with the Eagles tonight, but maybe they don't make it to the Eagles 53-man roster. It's a very good roster. It's deep at a lot of positions, but if you put on good tape tonight against the Bengals, that could convince another team to pick you up on their 53-man roster. So I'm watching this game closely tonight. On offense, I think there are 3 players to watch the most that are fighting for a spot on this team. For me, it's quarterback Cole Payton, it's right tackle Cameron Williams, and it's running back / fullback / tight end, whatever the hell you want to call him, Carson Steele. Those are the 3 players that I think, if they have a good game tonight, could push the Eagles to keep them, whereas right now, gun to my head, I predicted the Eagles 53-man roster earlier this week on Tuesday's show. I didn't have any of these guys making the team, but in previous 53-man roster prediction episodes, I have had Cameron Williams on there. I have had Cole Payton. I haven't had Carson Steele yet, but Carson Steele offers a really interesting kind of skill set for Sean Mannion's offense, where he's a good blocker. He could play fullback in this more traditional West Coast scheme where you're playing a lot of under center, a lot of play action. I think he's athletic enough as well to play running back if injuries did happen. he proved last week in the preseason game against New England that he can catch the football. I mean, he had, 6 receptions for 86 yards and an awesome touchdown where he hurdled the Patriots defender. And if you're watching us on YouTube, that's the picture I used for Carson Steele. He's hurdling that Patriots DB to score a touchdown. He also hurdled another guy for a first down in the second half of that game. So Carson Steele's an interesting player, and we've been talking a lot about tight end. If they can't rely on Eli Stowers early on to catch footballs in the regular season, we know Johnny Munt doesn't really offer much of a option there as well. A way to make up for that, like in years past, could be throwing to the running back more, throwing to a versatile kind of gadgety player like a Carson Steele. So I'm going to be watching him closely tonight. If he has another game like he did last week with over 110 yards from scrimmage, affecting the game on special teams, running the ball, catching the ball, he's scoring touchdowns, and he's blocking well, I think he could make this roster. Right now, I don't have him on the team. I have them keeping a couple extra offensive and defensive linemen instead of a fullback or whatever you want to call Carson Steele. But yeah, I think there is a path for him to make this roster. And for Cameron Williams, I love his ceiling. I really do. A lot of people said last year during the 2025 draft process that, coming out of Texas, if he would have waited one more year, maybe instead of a day 3 player, he would have been a day 2 prospect. Like, he has some legitimate traits. And because of that, and because Markel Bell isn't a sure thing to be the Lane Johnson heir apparent, you have him and Fred Johnson, but you want tackle depth. You want to keep at least 9 to 10 offensive linemen because of his ceiling. I felt like he was a shoo-in to make the roster, so I kept putting him on my predictions. But then this past Tuesday, I didn't, because the interior offensive line, the depth looks a lot better than I thought. That was also why I kept more tackles in the past than guards and centers. I didn't think there was 3 to 4 guard center backups worth keeping, but then Willie Lampkin just destroyed this offseason in the best way possible. Drew Kendall looks like, I think, the future starter at left guard if Landon Dickerson can't stay healthy or if he retires early in his career. And Jake Majors looks great as a center guard, hybrid, versatile backup on the interior. So I ended up not keeping Cameron Williams on this roster during Tuesday's prediction episode, but I think he's put on some solid tape. Like, I don't think he had a great game against the Patriots, but I thought he looked really solid, especially in pass pro against Baltimore. And you probably want optionality with that right tackle position long term. I would keep him and continue to develop his traits, but we'll see. If he doesn't have a great game again today, there's been a lot of good backup linemen that are stepping up. So I don't think it's the lock for him to be on this 53 like I thought it was a couple weeks ago. So I think he needs to have a good game to convince the Eagles to keep an extra tackle backup than maybe an extra guard or a center. And then Cole Payton, he really just has not played a lot this preseason. I'm wondering if, and Mark Farzetta and Harry Mays did not agree on our squad show yesterday, but I was wondering if, he only plays a couple minutes against Baltimore. He looks really good in that game. Then against New England on Saturday night last week, he only plays the final 57 seconds of the game, the final drive. Tanner McKee plays pretty much 3/4 of that football game. I'm wondering, maybe they're showcasing Tanner McKee to up his trade value because they want to keep Cole Payton on this 53-man roster. Maybe they're trying to hide Cole Payton, so they can get him through waivers and stash him on the practice squad because they want to keep both Dalton and McKee behind Jalen Hurts on the 53. Either way, we haven't watched Cole Payton enough. And maybe they've seen enough in camp and the limited preseason action they've seen to know he's worth a spot or not. But I personally, with my own eyes, would like to see a lot more of Cole Payton tonight against Cincinnati to be confident in either keeping him and feeling like, yeah, you can explore trades for McKee or Dalton, or seeing him be, definitely still far back in his development process and say, no, they need to keep Dalton and McKee and risk losing Cole Payton through waivers, even though he has a high ceiling. He's not worth keeping on the 53 right now over one of those guys. So again, yeah, maybe you want to stash him away and hide his ability if you've been really impressed, but I personally want to see more of him tonight before I would decide what I feel comfortable most with doing at the quarterback position. So those are the 3 guys on offense that I'm watching the most: Cameron Williams, Carson Steele, and Cole Payton. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, three defensive players that I think are fighting for a job on the Eagles 53 in the preseason finale tonight. We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by Home Chef. Life gets busy, and figuring out what's for dinner every night, it can quickly become just another thing on the to-do list. Home Chef takes the stress out of mealtime by delivering fresh ingredients and easy-to-follow recipes right to your door. Whether you're looking to eat healthier, save money on takeout, that's my big thing, or simply spend less time grocery shopping and meal planning, Home Chef makes cooking at home simple, convenient, and enjoyable. Home Chef offers more than 30 meal options every week, including calorie-conscious and GLP-1 friendly meals. There's, something for every schedule and lifestyle. People really love it. Home Chef is rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. For me, I have 2 full-time jobs during the week. I'm always on the go, got a social life, relationships, friendships. It gets busy, and figuring out what you're going to eat every day can become a hassle. So Home Chef, they take the difficulty out of it. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off and free shipping on your first box, plus free dessert for life. So go to homechef.com/LockedOnNFL. That's homechef.com/LockedOnNFL for 50% off your first box and free dessert for life. Homechef.com/LockedOnNFL. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. So 3 players on the defensive side of the ball that I really think have to have good games tonight against Cincinnati to make the Eagles 53-man roster. The guys that I'm watching the most tonight: edge rusher Joshua Wuru, the rookie from the International Pathway Program. He's been awesome in the first 2 weeks of the preseason. Deontay Lawson, the UDFA, it's a bunch of UDFAs, the UDFA linebacker out of Alabama. And then second-year cornerback Mac McWilliams. Joshua Wuru, Deontay Lawson, Mac McWilliams. Those are the guys I'm watching the most tonight against the Bengals, because when you look at each one of those guys in their situations, it's not a shoo-in that they're going to make the team, but for the Eagles as well, it's kind of like Cole Payton. Maybe everybody covering a football team, or a fan of a football team that runs a football team that's a GM, believes they have the best players and everybody's after their guys. And I'm sure the Bengals are saying too, we might have to hide this guy to get him through waivers onto the practice squad. So maybe, teams aren't as interested in your players as you think. But I think these guys on defense, especially Joshua Wuru, when you look at the physical ceiling that he has with the explosiveness, the size, the arm length, the bend, the agility. And then on top of that, even though he's never played football in his life before these last 2 weeks, then you see the tape that he's putting on for the All-22 against the Ravens and the Patriots, where he has 2 quarterback hits against the Ravens. He has a sack against the Patriots, and he's showing legitimate explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. That overall physical speed and those physical gifts are translating on the field. Whereas Uar Bernard, you haven't been able to see the physical traits yet, because, and same with Eli Stowers even, which is crazy for a second-round pick, but there's so much thinking going on, trying to learn the game, that you can't really put those athletic elite traits on display. You can't just, play reactionary football, play free, right? It feels like Joshua Wuru is playing free over these last 2 games. He even, on that sack, he stunts in to turn the tackle's hips. Then he gets outside leverage, uses bend to get around the corner of the tackle, and gets to the quarterback and finishes the play. I mean, that's such good teach tape for somebody that's never played football before. And I don't know if you're going to get him through waivers. There's other, reporters from other NFL teams that I'm seeing now on social media. Shout out to Anthony DeBona, one of the Eagles beat reporters for another platform. He pointed this out, hey, there are other teams that are now watching Joshua Wuru and talking about him on socials. So I think the cat's out of the bag, and if he has another good game tonight, I think he's probably a lock to be that, 5th or 6th edge rusher, depending on, I believe they'll keep both Ibikidi and Epineza, and that's your top 5 with Grenard, Smith, and Hunt. I think especially if you can get him to play special teams with that kind of speed, Joshua Wuru is likely going to make this team. And even Vic Fangio said in a press conference earlier in the week, yeah, you might keep some guys at the bottom of the roster that maybe they're not ready to be football players, but hey, you really like them and want to continue to develop them. He was definitely talking about either Wuru or Bernard. And knowing what Fangio likes in a player, I bet personally it's Wuru. Wuru reminds me a lot of Jalix Hunt in certain ways. I think Fangio was talking about him. So I think if he flashes even just a little bit again tonight, he's probably going to make this team. As for Mac McWilliams at corner, look, I know the Eagles are high on him. He's a draft pick from 2 years ago. They don't like to give up on their draft picks early on in the process, just a couple years into that rookie contract. Sounds like he's had a pretty good training camp, but man, his preseason tape has just not been good, plainly put. I thought he got picked on all night week 1 against Baltimore. I thought he did not tackle well against New England. Even in joint practices, some of the one-on-ones, and I know those are set up for receivers to beat corners, right? It's tough being a corner in the NFL, especially in, these manufactured joint practices. But I personally, and again, I have less to go off of than coaches and the GM in the front office because they've seen all these practices, but I haven't been impressed, and I feel like if he goes out there again and struggles, considering, Keely Ringo, I think personally has had, a solid overall summer in the preseason and camp. I don't know. I don't think he's a lock to make this team. Plus, you just got back, Jacorian Bennett is still an option. Jonathan Jones, the veteran you signed on a 1-year deal that has play experience. He just came back from injury. There are some other guys on the bubble, too, that you might want to keep. Plus, you have Michael Carter III, who has slot safety versatility. That's kind of what you were going to use Mac McWilliams for, was like inside-out versatility at corner. Maybe you don't need him as much as we originally thought. So I think he needs to have a good game. And then Deontay Lawson, I think he's battling for that number 5 linebacker spot on the inside with Chance Campbell. Lawson had a really good first game against the Ravens, but I thought Chance Campbell looked really impressive on tape against the Patriots. And Vic Fangio has mentioned Campbell multiple times as somebody that's kind of being underrated so far through the summer. Like, don't forget his name. Deontay Lawson is somebody I thought should be a draft pick. I like his ceiling. I feel like he's had a good summer for the Eagles from what I've seen personally. But I think right now he's a little bit behind the 8 ball. I think Chance Campbell is the favorite to be that 5th and final inside linebacker on the 53. But I don't think it's a given that it is Campbell. If Lawson goes out there and really looks impressive tonight on defense and special teams, I could see a world where he ends up making it over Campbell, and then your 5 linebackers are Zach Bond, Jihad Campbell, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I think Smile Mondon is a lock to be that 4th guy. The second-year player out of Georgia had a great preseason. And then I would say it's either Campbell or Lawson that make this team. But I do think they carry a 5th guy at inside linebacker. Vic Fangio said it's actually the deepest position he thinks on the defensive side of the ball, which is loaded with stars everywhere. So I think that's really saying a lot. And how about this for the Philadelphia Eagles? Like, times have changed, right? We used to pray for times like this, to quote Meek Mill. I mean, linebacker used to always be the thinnest position on this team growing up in a Howie Roseman world for Philadelphia Eagles football. And now they've got like 5 to 6 guys that I think Vic Fangio really likes, and he doesn't want to lose any of them. So I think Lawson, though, is definitely on the bubble more than anybody. Those are the 3 guys I'm watching the most on defense: Joshua Wuru, Deontay Lawson, and Mac McWilliams. And then again, to recap things on offense, Cameron Williams, Carson, Steele, and Cole Payton. All right, guys, we will wrap up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, the backup quarterback job. I don't know if it's still up in the air with Andy Dalton and Tanner McKee, but it still feels like the competition is under evaluation. If neither one of those guys are impressive enough tonight, or just in general, they haven't been impressive enough over this summer of training camp and the preseason, is Howie Roseman thinking about a trade for a quarterback? We'll talk about it next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Who could he target? Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is presented by 5 Hour Energy. There are certain flavors that, instantly feel like summer. And for a lot of people, those, classic red, white, and blue Freezy Pops are right at the top of that list. Sweet cherry, lime, blue raspberry. It's one of those nostalgic, summer flavors that everybody recognizes. You get out of the pool and you have one of those on the warm cement, pavement. Back in the day, that was the best. Now 5 Hour Energy, it's bringing that flavor combination into the new Firework Freeze 5 Hour Energy Shot, blending sweet cherry, zesty lime, and electric blue raspberry into one refreshing shot inspired by those iconic summer freezer pops. For me, I remember the backyard barbecues, in the backyard. That flavor just instantly takes me back to that time, being outside all day during summer break, riding bikes, playing football and basketball with the boys. Like I said, backyard barbecues, those freezer pops after a good day in the summer, that was always the best. Ignite your taste buds with the flavor of the summer. Get a Firework Freeze 5 Hour Energy Shot today. For more information, visit 5hourenergy.com. All right, wrapping up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with my guys Michael Fabiano and Marcus Mosher. I have my 2-keeper draft this Saturday night. I cannot wait. I got Bijan Robinson and Ashton Genty, but I got to get ready for the rest of my draft and how to set this lineup early in the year if Genty goes down. So I'm headed over to Locked On Fantasy Football. You can find them Monday through Friday on YouTube or wherever you listen to Locked On Eagles. Make Locked On Eagles your first listen, and then head over to the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast as your second listen. Shout out to my guys, Fabs and Mosher. They do great work over at Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, so I don't know if Andy Dalton has won the QB2 job. It'll be really fascinating tonight to see if, him and McKee play. If they both do, is it a similar situation where Dalton yet again starts the game? He only plays a couple drives and then Tanner McKee plays a majority of the game again? Or is it just Tanner McKee playing the first half and Cole Payton plays the second half? Is it all Andy Dalton and all Tanner McKee? I don't know what the Eagles are thinking here, where their head is at with QB2. For me personally, I don't trust Andy Dalton to be the backup for all of 2026. I believe it should be Tanner McKee. I've liked what I've seen better from him in the preseason over Dalton, and it sounds like it's been fairly even during training camp, maybe a little bit going towards Dalton over Tanner, but I trust Tanner. I think he's the better player. I think he has the better arm talent. I think he's been more productive over the last couple of years when he's been on the field, albeit it's a very limited sample size. But maybe they believe in Dalton. Maybe they don't believe in either of them. What if they come away with, after tonight saying, maybe the backup quarterback isn't on the team, or, one of them are, but we want to kind of get a 2A, 2B thing going on, and let's go find our, version of Sam Howell from a couple of years ago. They traded for Sam Howell at the end of the, training camp summer process. Is there a guy out there like that again that you'd rather have be the QB3 or 2A, 2B over Dalton, McKee, or Cole Payton? I could see the Eagles being interested in something like that, or going for a guy with a ceiling, a more long-term project at quarterback that's not Cole Payton. Like somebody with mobility that maybe fits more behind Jalen Hurts, so the offense doesn't have to completely change. And I know backup, pocket passers fit a Sean Mannion offense more than a Nick Sirianni offense, but still, going from a mobile quarterback to a pocket statue in any offense is going to be different, because you're still going to run RPOs and read option, quarterback designed runs, and that's going to be part of your bread and butter. And then if you go from, Jalen Hurts to a 39-year-old Andy Dalton, or a statue of a pocket passer in Tanner McKee, who's young, but dude can't move. He's got the mobility of a dump truck. I don't know if that always fits, but the Eagles always kind of go in that direction. What if you go for somebody with more talent? It's a lower floor, but like a project like Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis. Like, would they be interested in that instead of having, it being Dalton and McKee? Maybe you go for a safer player like one of those two, and then you go for a ceiling guy like Richardson or Levis. Or maybe you don't buy McKee or Dalton as a safe option, and what about somebody like Gardner Minshew? Gardner Minshew right now in Arizona, and Minshew I thought was the Eagles' best backup of this era, back in 2022 and 2023, of, him, Mariota, Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee, Andy Dalton. I think Minshew was the guy I trusted the most when Jalen Hurts went down. I thought he showed in 23, I'm sorry, that was Mariota. It was 2021 in 2022. That Minshew could come in, if he's got to start a couple games, he can keep you afloat. He can win games for you. In Arizona, they have Jacoby Brissett as QB1. Carson Beck is a third-round pick that lit the Hall of Fame game on fire. He's been injured since, but I think they like Carson Beck a lot. Is Gardner Minshew somebody that could be available for trade and you see him as an upgrade over McKee and Dalton? I could totally see that. So those are three options that I would be intrigued by, more for ceiling when it comes to Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. If you're thinking about just an upgrade purely as the best QB2 option for this year, and we're not thinking about style, mobility, we're not thinking about like long-term objective over Cole Payton, and it's just about who's the best guy if Jalen Hurts goes down this year. For me, I think Gardner Minshew would be a better option than Dalton. McKee, it's really close. I like Tanner still. I still believe in him. And I think he fits the Sean Mannion offense really well. I thought he really played well in the confines of that offense, quick passing on Saturday night against New England. But I think Minshew is a guy that I really trust. And if he's available from Arizona, Howie Roseman makes a lot of trades in the month of August. I guarantee you there will be trades, there will be moves made after tonight against the Bengals to get down to the official 53-man roster for this football team moving forward. And I could see like a trade for a Gardner Minshew, being on the horizon. I wouldn't rule that out, as a potential possibility. All right, guys, we will see what happens tonight in the preseason finale. We'll be live after the game as well, myself and Harry Mays. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles on all audio platforms and on YouTube as well to get that show and a daily podcast Monday through Friday. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until later on, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.